It's been a week since AYATO came out on the Genshin Impact server, so I think it's about time we talk about where does AYATO belong in the current Genshin Impact meta. A lot of stuff have happened over the week, from Yelin's announcement on the official Genshin Impact Twitter, which mean that, well, we don't know what she does, but we do know that she has better armpit, to the fact that Kachemi just straight up gave up on video crafting AYATO because, well, they tried to paint Kacheng on the r/Fake Reddit instead. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Alright, no one tell them I did that. On the bright side, we still have the Chinese free crafter Giga Chat to do AYATO work for us. So hey, with that being said, let's talk about if AYATO is truly worth your primo if you're just looking for a meta pull. Of course, before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notification. Anyway, let's get started. Last week, during our first impression, we talked about how AYATO is a balanced and a good character, and I think not much has changed since then. He is not weak, but he's not broken or strong either, which means he's perfectly in the middle, which is balanced. And I think that's a really good thing about AYATO. Would you rather have a strong character that is not fun to play, or would you rather have a weak character that is really fun to play? Well, you probably want the one in the middle, which is a really good character, a really fun character that is also really balanced, and that's exactly where AYATO is. In fact, I think AYATO is the perfect middle ground character at the current Genshin Impact meta, the most balanced character there is by far. Previously, I said that was Itto, and now that's like AYATO. Sadly for AYATO, even though he is pretty decent, he isn't quite as good as his other Hydro competitor, which are like Childe or Kokomi, which means that he is not really worth rolling for if all you care about is pure meta strength, because, well, other character does it better. It doesn't mean that AYATO is bad, it simply means that other characters are better, and so you prefer to roll other characters over him, which make him not a great pickup if you're looking for pure meta purposes. And let's dive deeper into that. Let's start by talking about Hyper Carry AYATO, which to my surprise was very popular, especially overseas at CN. Maybe everyone just wanted AYATO to do big numbers. But Hyper AYATO is made up of AYATO, Bennett Kazuha as you expect, and then Yunjin or sometimes Xingqius. But you realize that while this team is pretty decent, it is honestly not that great. Replacing the Yunjin with Xiangli or replacing the AYATO or Xingqius with Xiangli just give you a regular Vaporise team, which is much better. You will realize that AYATO have small amount of problem taking advantage of Bennett Kazuha because he has a 6-second downtime between his elemental skill, which means that he doesn't fully utilize Bennett Kazuha to their greatest potential, especially when you're comparing him to a character that can snapshot, who can easily take full advantage of Bennett Kazuha. So it's just not that great of a use. Is his team decent? Yeah, but is his team great? No. And when we're talking about the meta, which means most effective tactic available, we're looking for a team that are really great or broken, not just okay or decent team. So with that being said, I think this is the perfect transition to talk about Vaporise team instead. Putting AYATO into a Vaporise team means that you are facing competition for the Hydro slot with Chao, and to be honest, that's a pretty big barrier to overcome. And unfortunately for AYATO, Chao just does it better. While both of these characters can apply a good amount of Hydro in AoE fashion that allows Xiangli to Vaporize them, Chao is able to take advantage of Bennett Kazuha much better than AYATO, which just means that he's much more suitable for the team. AYATO can't fully take advantage of Bennett because of his cooldown problem on his elemental skills, or you can just not cast your second elemental skill, which means you run into energy problem instead, so it's like a pick your poison kind of case. But the most important part is that AYATO cannot take advantage of Kazuha, which is a really big deal. Because you start your rotation with AYATO Elemental Burst, what's gonna happen is that you're gonna apply too much Hydro to the point where you actually cannot swirl Pyro on your Kazuha, and that is a really big deal because not only you lose the damage percent bonus on your Xiangli, you also lose the chances of swirling Pyro on your enemy, which means that you don't get the VV shred on your enemy. For Childe, not only you can easily double swirl, which means that you can get Hydro percent damage bonus as well, but the most important part is that Childe Elemental Burst is a giant nuke that can easily take advantage of Bennett Kazuha. So what you would do is you will swirl Hydro and then you will apply Pyro on the enemy using Bennett Elemental Burst, and then while you have Bennett Elemental Burst buff and Kazuha buff activate on your Childe, you would Vaporize his Elemental Burst for a fat ton of damage. That huge upfront nuke is actually really significant, and it's something that AYATO cannot do at all, and just on that part alone, AYATO pretty much already lost. Fortunately for AYATO, we still have Sucrose, who is also a Giga Chat Anemo support. You can actually double swirl with Ayato on Sucrose by first casting Ayato Elemental Burst and then normal attacking on Sucrose to swirl the Hydro, switching to Xiangling to give her the TTDS but also dropping Goba, and then finally swirling Goba himself to swirl the Pyro onto the enemy, which completely double swirl setup. Losing Kazuha really sucks though, especially since we are talking about using Hydro in a AOD environment across both Chao and Ayato. So the big grouping that Kazuha can bring definitely help a lot. Plus, if you have a Kazuha, you probably want to use your Kazuha, and not being able to use your Kazuha just feels really bad. Forcing yourself to use his Elemental Burst every single rotation when so much of his power budget is actually on his Elemental skill is just not great. To be honest, why go through all of this trouble when you can just run Chao, right? And yeah, that's really it is. Chao is better in Vaporize because of various things, and well, that just means Ayato is not the better Hydro applicator in National Team. A similar trend can be seen in Freeze Team where your competition is other off-field Hydro applicator, namely Kokomi, who can bring a lot of utility. Now, Ayato looked like he worked pretty decently in Freeze Team because he was easy to play, but I think that's just an illusion. Something to note is that just because he is easy to play and he can fit into a Freeze Team does not mean that he's optimal to play in a Freeze Team. And to be honest, after a week, I actually think he's not that great in Freeze Team. Ayato have a pretty big ER issues in a Freeze Team because you only get to cast his elemental skill once, which means you have to build a massive amount of ER on Ayato, which means that you will not have that much damage on Ayato to begin with. When you compare Ayato to like Kokomi, you just realize that Kokomi can just do more. Not only Kokomi can heal, which means that she can bring you extra comfort in your Freeze Team, she can also bring a TTDS, which means that you can buff your crowd main damage character by a lot. And usually when it comes to a Freeze Team, you would much rather to buff your crowd characters than to bring another character who can do damage. 48% attack is no joke when you put it on your main crowd damaging character like Ganyu, who can snapshot the buff onto her Elemental Burst, or Ayaka, who Elemental Burst lasts so short that you can easily benefit for the entire duration anyway. Not to mention that these characters will be carrying the Blizzard Slayer set for 40% critical rate, which means that they will just be unleashing a lot more damage. You know the current 12-2-2 in the new updated Abyss? Imagine just grouping the three enemies together and then using your super buffed Ayaka to one-shot the enemy. Why do you care about Ayato at all? Just one-shot the enemy using your Elemental Burst on Ayaka with that TDDS buff. Not to mention that while it is not hard to swirl Hydro in a freeze comp, you could have just not swirl Hydro to begin with when you're using character like Kokomi or even Mona, because they don't do any damage anyway, so you just don't care to swirl Hydro. In fact, as far as I know from the video crafting side of stuff, Ayato is actually not even up to par with Mona in a freeze team simply because of all the utility that Mona can bring. Namely, again, those are TDDS but also Omen. And while one might argue that Ayato have much higher Hydro uptime than Mona, the truth is that you don't care too much about that small uptime, as well when you're using things like Ayaka, you only care to freeze during Ayaka Elemental Burst, and while it is nice to freeze out of time as well, it is actually not that big of a deal. And finally, we move on to Taser Team just like how we did in the first impression. I think after a week, a lot of people have similar conclusion that yeah, Taser Team is just gonna be Ayato's best team, which to be honest is really good. Taser Team is really comfy with Ayato, running TF or no TF, either one's work. Ayato does drive Taser Team much better than ones like Chao, who to be honest is not that good in Taser Team, but also to some extent Kokomi, excluding the fact that Kokomi can of course heal. But to be honest, is it really necessary considering that this video is about meta, and so far the Abyss meta has been some kind of national team plus some kind of freeze team on two of your party. That's not to say that Taser Team sucks, because Taser Team is definitely really good, but to be honest, I would much rather to roll a Kokomi for my freeze team, and then if I do decide to play a Taser Team, I'll just bring out that exact same Kokomi, kind of like a 2-in-1 deal. While we're talking about meta, which is how good a character is, keep in mind that there is also the aspect of value which we focus on a lot, aka how much do you have to pay for that power. And sometimes even though it is a improvement, it might just not be worth it, as the case with Shanhe, where Shanhe is a pretty good character but just not worth it because, well, alternative exists that is just as good. As alternative Taser Team, especially the one that involves Sucrose exists, namely Sucrose, Xingqiu's, Fischl, and Beidou, I just don't think that Ayato is that good of a role at the current moment. And while one might say, well, the Sucrose version is too hard for me to play, there's no healer and my Xingqiu's will be busy. That is kind of true, but hopefully they'll be soft in the near future, either through a Electro healer because we're missing one, or just a character who can replace Xingqiu's in that team, because well, Xingqiu is too busy. Sasuke. Now, I wanted to say that this video is made without any Sasuke stuff in mind, because, well, as mentioned throughout this video, AYATO pretty much lose to existing Hydro characters like Chao or Kokomi, depending on which context you're looking him in. But if we look at the Sasuke stuff, then to be honest, AYATO is looking kind of not as thick as Yelin. At the end of the day, I wouldn't really recommend rolling AYATO for a meta reason. Keep in mind that he is balanced, and I think he is good because he's a fun character that is balanced, as I mentioned in the first impression video. And if you're just a huge fan of AYATO, you should definitely roll for AYATO without letting this video decide for you, or you should just decide if it's worth it for your primo or not. I think you wouldn't really regret it because overall he's still a really good character that functions in multiple teams. He's just not optimal in some of them. And keep in mind that just because a character is not optimal in a position doesn't automatically mean that they're bad. It is just that unfortunately when the topic is, well, the meta, then we're looking for the most effective available tactic, which are characters that are above and beyond and does things that other character cannot do, which is not really the case with AYATO. He's quite mediocre, balanced, good, whatever, somewhere in the middle. I don't think it's a bad thing to make balanced characters. We can all appreciate a balanced character that is not too weak or too strong, can we? But with that being said, that is pretty much it for AYATO. Don't forget, as always, to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all when imbalanced character come out.